For millennia, the galaxy believed its ancient god warriors were extinct, beings of pure destruction, long sealed or vanished. Legends said they were born from planets that tore themselves apart. But now one stirs again, and it's not an alien relic, not a superweapon. It's a human, not just powerful, designed for judgment. And the galaxy realizes too late. This war isn't just political or territorial. It's divine, because humanity didn't lose their gods. They became them. Before memory, there was war. Not a war of fleets. Not a war of species. Not even a war of territory. It was older than those things. A war of will. Of what had the right to exist. And what would be left to watch when the silence returned. The records called them judgment-class entities. Singular beings. Not born. Not made. Unleashed. They appeared only in moments of collapse, when civilizations tipped into arrogance so great, the stars themselves turned away. And when they came, they ended things. Completely. Not with fire. Not with rage. With silence. One breath. One step. And entire empires vanished like they had never been. Galactic archives say there were 3. Maybe 4. None confirmed. No direct imagery. Only the stories carved in the walls of derelict moons and lightless vaults. A being made of memory and light. It stood where gravity failed. It did not kill. It corrected. Most species believed they were myths. Fabrications to explain collapses no one could understand. Ghost stories for empires that fell without a trace. But some remembered. The oldest ones. The long-lived. The cautious. The ones who knew that sometimes history doesn't repeat, it waits. And recently, quietly, something had changed, deep in the cold systems, at the edge of mapped space. A pattern, tiny gravitational disturbances, anomalous time dilation, encrypted pulses no one could trace. Too regular to be natural, too precise to be accidental. Most species ignored it. Too distant, too minor, but not Earth. Earth had been watching for decades. They didn't respond, didn't send probes, didn't ask for help. They just went silent. Archived communications to the region were rerouted. Exploration permits revoked. Systems labeled unstable without explanation. When asked, Terran officials offered vague answers. Old territory, not relevant, best to avoid. But some remember the stories. The rumors about Earth's early expansion, that there had once been a Terran colony, long ago, cut off during the collapse, lost in the dark, and that whatever had happened there was enough for Earth to seal the system and never speak of it again. Until now, because something was moving again in that place. Something old, not a ship, not a fleet, just presence, the kind that bends trajectories, that bends memory. One listening post reported a brief blackout, exactly 3.2 seconds. When they came back online, their logs had been rewritten by something that didn't want to be remembered. And it wasn't hostile. It was patient, waiting for something, for someone. And in the void between pulses, in the static between frequencies, one phrase appeared. Not spoken, not transmitted, written like a whisper across the stars. Judgment remembers. The planet had no name anymore. Not on the maps, not in the records. Just a system tag, unclaimed. Uninhabitable, dead, bird atmosphere, cracked terrain, subsurface radiation. No reason for anyone to be there, which is why it was perfect for a salvage crew. Unregulated space. No taxes. No questions. They came looking for old tech. Abandoned cores. Anything sellable. Instead, they found the crater. It wasn't natural. Perfectly circular. Miles across. Edges smooth like glass. At the center, something protruded. Not wreckage. Not stone. Structure. Black metal. Angular. Buried deep. They landed anyway. Sent drones. Got nothing back. So they went in. The facility beneath the surface was intact. Powerless, but untouched. Walls lined with alloy that didn't match any modern material. Symbols etched into every surface. Not Terran. Not alien. Just old. The crew joked nervously, so it looked like a tomb, like something meant to be forgotten. They weren't wrong. At the lowest level, they found the chamber. Cylindrical. Enormous. carved with runes that shimmered without light. And in the center, a platform. And on the platform, a man, human, perfectly still, eyes closed, chest rising slow and steady. Alive, unaged, unchanged. He wore no armor, no implants, no visible signs of containment. Just a simple black suit, threaded with something the scanners couldn't penetrate. And at his feet, circling the platform like a protective halo, a phrase written in Terran Old High Script. He sleeps beneath memory. The crew didn't touch him, didn't dare. They called it in, tagged the location, prepared to leave. But one of them stayed behind, a young technician, curious. She didn't step close. She just watched. The figure didn't move. But something did. Not in the air, not in the stone. In her. A weight, a pressure. Not physical. Remembering something she never lived. She saw cities burning, sky falling, people screaming names that no longer existed, and the feeling of something standing between them and annihilation. Him. Then she heard it. Not a voice, not a sound, a thought. Not yet. She fell backward, eyes wide, heartbeat spiking, and just like that it was gone. When the others returned, she didn't speak, just pointed to the platform. He's not in stasis, she whispered. He's waiting. Earth responded to the signal within the hour. No questions, no delay. A Terran Black Site team arrived, silent, fast, precise. They didn't examine the figure, didn't ask who he was. They just activated the seals. And for the first time in centuries, the containment runes glowed. Lines of white fire, pulsing gently, not restraining, calming, as if the system had recognized something. Someone. Earth left without explanation. And the salvage crew was paid. Well, but their names were wiped, their ship reassigned, their memories altered, all except for the technician. She remembered everything. And sometimes, when she was alone and the stars aligned just right, she could still hear it. That voice. That not yet. And she knew, whatever that thing was beneath the surface of that broken planet, it wasn't waiting for orders. It wasn't sleeping. It was listening. And the galaxy? The galaxy had just whispered loud enough to wake it up. It began with stars flickering. Nothing violent. No supernova. No explosions. Just a subtle dimming, barely noticeable. One system, then two, then six. Astronomers across the mid-rim logged the anomaly. At first, they thought it was dust, atmospheric distortion, sensor drift. But the data was clean, and the dimming matched one point in space. A world no one should have been watching, except Earth. And Earth didn't blink, because deep beneath that broken surface, in the chamber once buried in myth and fear, he moved, just a shift, a single breath deeper than the last. And across 3 systems, machines stuttered. Satellites blinked out for half a second. AI cores rebooted with no explanation. Stellar charts rewritten mid-calculation. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't a surge. It was presence. Something had stepped back into the equation, and the math broke trying to hold it. Inside the chamber, cameras failed. Thermal scans returned nonsense. Gravimetric readings became unstable. He opened his eyes, not glowing, not crackling with power, just human, brown, steady, focused, and looking at nothing, because his gaze went through the walls, through the ground, through the systems above and the stars beyond, like he was searching for something, or remembering where he left it. He didn't rise. He didn't speak. But above the planet, the orbiting Terran observation vessel went dark. For 3 minutes. Every system, every backup, even the manual lights. When they returned, the crew hadn't moved. But none of them remembered the blackout, except the pilot. She sat silently in her chair, hands clenched white. She didn't speak for hours. And when she did, she whispered. He asked if we were ready. The rest of the crew said nothing happened. But the pilot? She saw him, not just in the chamber, but everywhere. She saw him standing on a battlefield that no longer existed. She saw stars folding inwards. She saw a universe that had once screamed in fire, and one man standing still in the middle of it. Judgment. Elsewhere, sensors across the galaxy continued to fail. Briefly, randomly. It didn't make sense until someone mapped the pattern. The malfunctions formed a shape, a circle, centered on that broken world, as if space itself was bracing. Council fleets moved in. Carefully, quietly, 3 ships approached the system. Frigate class, armed, shielded. When they crossed into orbit, they announced themselves. Standard procedure. They received no reply. They waited. One ship powered up targeting systems. Not to fire, just to prepare. They never got the chance. Not because they were attacked, because they stopped. Every ship, every system, every mind. Time didn't freeze. It just paused. Only for a second. But when it passed, the ships had shifted position. Microscopically, and every crew member, without exception, had the same image in their heads. A man, standing on the hull of their ship, looking in, saying nothing. And then they were back. No alarms. No damage. Just silence. One admiral, veteran of 20 campaigns, debriefed that day. She didn't finish her report. She just stood, stared at the recording device, and said, "We were measured." That night, her fleet left orbit. Not from fear, from understanding. They weren't in the presence of a weapon. They were in the presence of consequence. Because whatever had woken on that world wasn't angry. It wasn't confused. It was patient. And now, it was watching. The galaxy wanted answers. What was it? Who was it? Why now? The council demanded full disclosure. Terran representatives were summoned. Emergency sessions called. All eyes turned to Earth. And for 3 days, nothing. No response. No statement. Just silence. Until a frequency opened. Old bandwidth. Obsolete. Unused for centuries. And a voice came through. No title. No greeting. Just words. Spoken slowly. Clearly. For all to hear. You believed judgment was lost. You were wrong. Judgment was not a weapon. It was not a punishment. It was not a god. It was witness. The chamber fell silent. Every translator paused. Every note-taker stopped. Because the voice wasn't angry. It wasn't threatening. It was tired. The kind of tired that comes from watching the same mistakes happen again and again. And still hoping this time might be different. You built your empires on convenience. You traded memory for comfort. You called history a myth. We did not. We remembered. They didn't explain what had been found beneath the broken planet. They didn't name him. They didn't have to. Because now, every system near that world had gone quiet. Traffic rerouted. Probes withdrawn. Even pirate groups abandoned nearby corridors. No one wanted to be the next one who saw him. He is not a secret. He is a scar. And we kept him buried, not to hide him from you, but to keep him from waking up too soon. But now, the voice faded slightly, as if choosing its next words with care. Now he remembers. That was all. The signal ended. No further explanation. No questions answered. Earth didn't clarify whether it had built him, or whether he had always existed. They didn't say if there were others. They didn't need to, because what mattered wasn't the what or the how. It was the why, and the why was simple. Judgment returns only when it must, and only when asked. But who had asked? Some blamed the salvage crew. Some said it was the chaos growing across the spiral arms. A war brewing. A civilization falling into old habits. Whatever the cause, one thing was clear. Humanity had known, had watched, had waited. And the entity beneath that world, the being now awake, aware, and watching, was not there to fight. He was there to remember, to recall a time when a galaxy had nearly ended itself and had been given one chance to choose something better. Judgment wasn't vengeance. It was accounting, and the debt was long past due. The Arathri Dominion had always believed in domination. They saw power as destiny. They saw history as theirs to revise. And they saw the sleeping thing beneath the Terran world as an opportunity. Not a warning, not a memory, a resource. They moved fast. A private fleet. Experimental tech. Shielded comms. They didn't tell the Council. Didn't warn Earth. Because they didn't think they needed to. After all, this was just a human. Even if it was old. Even if it was strange. It had no army. No planet. No fleet. Just a body. Just silence. The Arathri wanted to wake it. Harness it. Command it. So they landed. They breached orbit with stealth tech. Slipped through the automated Terran perimeter. Reached the surface. and descended into the dark. It started quiet. They entered the chamber, found him still seated on the platform, eyes open, waiting. They surrounded him, brought null field generators, suppression algorithms, containment runes stolen from pre-council vaults. And they spoke. They told him who they were, told him what he would become, told him what they expected him to do. And he listened. No resistance, no move, just that quiet gaze, like a man watching waves crash on a beach that's already eroded. And then he stood. The chamber didn't shake. Reality did. Every surface bent slightly. Not broken, not torn, just reconsidered. The Arathri commander tried to issue a command, but his voice didn't leave his mouth. The air froze around it, like the sound itself had changed its mind. Then came the shift, not from the man, from the planet. The ground beneath the facility rose, curved upward, folded into itself. A mountain formed in seconds, growing from the ruins. Not built, rewritten. The Terran perimeter went dark, then turned inward. Satellites collapsed into orbit, their data cores wiped mid-fall. Above the system, the Arathri fleet powered up weapons. And stopped. Not from damage, not from interference, from choice. Every onboard AI, every battle routing node, every weapons array refused to act, refused to even aim. All systems rerouted to display one phrase. Judgment has been acknowledged. Then came the light. Not an explosion, not a beam, a sphere, white gold, soft, expanding outward from the mountain's peak. It passed through matter without heat, through minds without damage, and left one thing behind: memory. Arathri officers dropped to their knees, not in pain, in understanding, because in that moment they saw what judgment saw: the wars, the betrayals, the promises broken across 1,000 worlds. They felt the grief of forgotten billions, the weight of treaties made and ignored, the ache of civilizations that had cried for help and been told to wait. And they knew this being was not punishing them. It was correcting them. And correction didn't require violence. It required removal. The Arathri flagship didn't explode. It simply stopped existing. One moment, present. The next, replaced by empty space. No debris. No radiation spike. No transition. Just gone. And on every ship in the system, Council, Terran, Neutral, one image appeared. A figure standing atop a curved ridge of stone. Eyes closed. And beneath him, written in radiant symbols. No one was listening. Now you will remember. He was never given a name. Not one that lasted. Across records, across centuries, his designations changed. Test subject. Sentinel. Failsafe. Prototype. But the earliest title they gave him, when Earth was still rebuilding, still afraid of itself, was simple. Witness 01. The first and only of his kind. Not because the program failed, but because they never had the strength to make another. He wasn't born into war. He was born after the collapse, after the sky turned red and cities crumbled, after Earth nearly tore itself apart. He was forged in silence, not from ambition, from grief. Humanity's last great act before the first era ended was not a fleet. It was a man, built not to lead, not to fight, but to remember. His body was shaped from reinforced flesh, layered carbon, and adaptive genetic memory. His mind was older than language, infused with stored trauma from wars Earth couldn't bear to document. The firebombing of Terra 3, the breach of the Mars vaults, the silence that followed the fall of the line. He carried all of it, because someone had to. That was the idea, not to create a god, to create a mirror, a being who would never forget what humanity had survived, a living scar. And they told him, as they sealed him beneath the surface, "We don't need you to protect us. We need you to stop us if we ever forget what we were." He asked no questions. He simply sat and waited. The program was buried, the world blacklisted, the system erased, because Earth had learned that peace built on forgetting is just a countdown, and they refused to start the clock again. He slept through 5 centuries. He missed Earth's rise to the Council. He missed the age of cooperation. He missed the quiet optimism that the galaxy might stay balanced. And then the signs returned. Treaties broken. Power rising unchecked. Empires testing the edge. The same pattern. Different faces. And in the dark beneath a broken sky, Judgment remembered. But he did not wake in anger. Not in vengeance. He woke in sorrow. Because he had seen this before. Not in dreams. In design. His systems activated not from orders, but from resonance. He felt the fear building in others. Felt the same echoes from the fall of the line. And the directive activated. If memory is abandoned, you will become memory. Not to punish. To witness. To preserve what others refuse to carry. When the Arathri attacked, it didn't threaten Earth. They threatened the truth Earth buried in him. And for that, they were not destroyed. They were removed. Because death would be too fast. Judgment didn't want to end them. He wanted them to remember what it felt like to be stopped. And for the first time in recorded galactic history, it wasn't humanity explaining themselves. It wasn't humans demanding peace. It was one man, quiet, alone, carrying a history that burned so bright. He turned everything else to shadow. No one tried to fight him again. Not after the Arathri vanished. Not after their fleets turned to vaporless silence. The council debated. Of course they did. There were calls for retaliation, for escalation, for understanding. But no one moved. Because how do you fight a man who doesn't declare war? How do you resist a being that doesn't threaten, just remembers louder than you can lie? Delegations sent envoys. One by one. Some brought apologies. Others brought offers. None got close. Not because of defenses, because they couldn't step forward. Every time a ship entered the system, the closer they came, the heavier it felt. Not gravity, not force, something older, guilt. Even species who had nothing to do with the Arathri felt it. Because this wasn't about one incident. It was about what they had allowed to fester. Every compromise, every overlooked injustice, every whispered deal in the shadow of treaties they signed in daylight. And Judgment stood still. Never moved, never blinked. The planet around him reshaped itself daily. Mountains crumbled, then rose again. Skies split with light, then cleared. The world breathed in his silence. Then one day, a single vessel entered orbit. No shields, no weapons, no escort. It carried one being, not a warrior, not a politician, a monk, from a species long thought extinct. She descended, alone. No armor, no translator. She walked until she saw him, atop the ridge that had once been a chamber, then a mountain, now a throne of stone. She knelt and said nothing. Judgment looked at her, said nothing, and still the balance shifted, because after her, others came, one by one, from rival empires, from old enemies, from species who had once ruled and burned, not in submission, not in worship, in recognition. Because they finally saw what Earth had built. Not a god, not a weapon, a consequence. And no one, not even the proudest admiral, could look at him without feeling the pull of history like a hand on the spine. The council sent a final delegation. Every major power, every voice that had once doubted Earth's restraint. They did not bring demands. They brought questions. Not what are you, but why now? And when Judgment finally spoke, not with thunder, not with fire, but with voice like falling snow. The stars seemed to listen. You were warned. You were asked. You were taught. But you forgot. And forgetting is how the last world ended. He did not accuse. He did not lecture. He just reminded. I am not the beginning. I am what comes when you run out of beginnings. The council asked if he would stand down, if Earth would reclaim him. He shook his head. Earth does not command me. Earth remembers. I am that memory given shape. And when asked what he wanted, he answered with the same calm. Nothing, because desire leads to war, and I am what comes after. The council kneeled. Not all of them, not at once, but enough, because they saw now what Judgment was. He was not punishment. He was the moment when history becomes too heavy to carry forward without help. He was the proof that someone, somewhere, had finally learned from pain and refused to forget. He could have stayed, could have rewritten star charts, could have dismantled empires, could have spoken laws into stone and watched the galaxy obey. But he didn't, because that was never his purpose. He wasn't built to lead. He wasn't born to rule. He was there to end the question. The one the galaxy kept asking with every broken treaty, every veiled threat, every silence that followed suffering. Will anyone stop us? And now they had an answer. Not through fire, not through dominance, but through stillness. He stood atop that broken world for 7 more days. Did not move, did not eat, did not breathe in the way lesser beings did. He just was. The planet stopped reshaping. The air stilled. Even the magnetic field settled into a slow, harmonic pulse, matching something old and human. And then he walked, not into the stars, not into a portal. He walked into the ground. Stone opened. The world made space. He did not speak again. No ceremony, no declaration, just the sound of footsteps. And then nothing. Satellites failed to find him. Drones sent to follow simply turned back. Every scan returned static. The world was quiet, but different, because now the galaxy knew. Judgment wasn't an event. It was a phase. It came when a lie went on too long, when peace was worn like a mask, when memory was treated like inconvenience. And it did not destroy. It reminded. The council called the planet Kether Prime, a neutral system, no settlements, no military presence, just orbiting buoys with one message. Here stood Judgment. He did not come to punish. He came because we forgot. Earth remained silent. They issued no statement, filed no claim, sent no ships. When asked, a single Terran representative responded. We were never in control of him. That's why it worked. He was never programmed, never bound. He was chosen by pain, by history, by the weight of what humanity had survived and refused to forget. He was not vengeance. He was what comes after vengeance fails. A boundary, a reckoning, a choice. And now he was gone. Not dead, not dismissed, just waiting again. Some say he still walks in the dark space between stars. That sometimes ships passing through deep sectors report dreams they don't remember having, of fire and stone, and a man watching them from a ridge. Some say he was never real, that he was Earth's greatest illusion, the galaxy's greatest mirror. But those who felt him, truly felt him, never doubted, because he didn't change who they were. He showed them who they'd become, and the galaxy began to move differently. More treaties held, more voices were heard, more memories were preserved, not because of fear, because of remembrance, because Judgment had walked once. And if the galaxy forgot again, he might walk again. Final line, quiet, heavy, unshakable. Humanity didn't build a weapon. They gave their memory a face. And when the galaxy stopped listening, they let it speak.